Hello there everyone, it's Carol here and it's Tuesday, so I'm bringing you another technique which I'm putting into my little sample book, and this is one that I've done ages ago and I've not looked at it since. And when I was looking through my book I was like, oh, really need to do some of that again. It creates a fascinating background. So here it is in close-up. Here's a background of a tag that I made, and I'm hoping that you can see that okay, because the sun has suddenly decided to put his hat on and come out to play. So that's sort of the effect that you get. You may see it better on the brown background there. It's a little bit on the unusual side, but it's a fascinating technique to have a go at doing. There are other techniques that you can do with wax paper, and I have had a go at them and I haven't always been particularly successful with them, so I'm going to omit those today because I would rather have the technique off pat so that I can show you properly how it all works. Okay, so you never know, you might get some more videos in the future with wax paper techniques. Here's my instruction card, so I'm going to put that off to the side. I'll stick that into my book later on and I'll show you the materials that we're going to use to create this. So here are the materials that I'm going to use, and the most important one is the wax paper. So I'm using Reynolds Cut-Right wax paper. I have got this in my Amazon shop under paper. The link for that is in the description box beneath this video, and it comes on a big long roll. There is 23 meters of this. So if you really like the technique, it's well worth getting this roll. I think it retails at around about £9 for this big roll, and this is double-sided wax paper, so it's got wax on both sides of the paper. I've just had my pop-up shop and I included these wax paper bags so that those that purchase the bags could have a little play at this technique. And again, this is waxed on both sides. It's a food grade waxed bag, so we'll have a little play with that as well. The other things that I've got are some inks. So I've got Faded Jeans and Victorian Velvet in Distress Oxide, and I've got Dusty Concord in the Distress Ink. You'll need some substrates to do this on, which means the background papers. So I've got some guest checks, some coffee dyed index cards, some plain index cards, and just some plain pieces of card. And I am going to be using some larger pieces of card in this demo as well, and a pair of scissors, some kitchen roll so that you can wipe off the excess, and the last thing that you're going to need is an iron. And it needs to be hot and dry, alright, so no steam. So let me put all this to one side and we'll get started with playing. Just one other thing that I wanted to show you. This is a board that I work on, that I demonstrate on in my videos, and sometimes I want to protect it. Recently I put up some film, a special cling film to my windows that's decorative, and this was the backing paper. And so what I've done is I've slid it underneath the board and then I've rolled it up at the side of a board so that I can just unroll it. And now I've got this as a protective surface for my board. So that might be a little idea for you to help you to protect your board, but it also then keeps it at the side so that it's ready to use straight away. First thing I'm going to do is undo this bag so it makes it into just a single sheet of wax paper. So I'll just pull it apart, and if it won't come apart I'll cut it. So be warned, you're going to get cut if you don't work properly. Always talking to inanimate objects, and then pull it apart down the seam, down the back. Oh, ripping. There we go. So I've now got one great big long piece to use. So I want to cut the wax paper to the size of my substrate. I don't want it to be any bigger. And I've just put my iron on to heat up. So if I cut along that line there, and trim away the excess. And it doesn't have to be straight, just so long as it's slightly smaller than the actual substrate, okay? And I know that that's a little bit too wide at that bottom edge, so I'm just going to trim a little bit more off there. So all we're going to do now is just scrumple it up. And you can unscrumple it and scrumple it again, so that basically what you're doing is you're breaking the wax and cracking it. And then we're going to open it up, and we're not going to fully flatten it out, we just want it sort of opened back out again, right? So I'm going to put my substrate down, I'm going to put the wax paper on top, and then because it's got double-sided wax, I'm going to put another one on top of that. And make sure it's within the confines of the paper, because otherwise I'm going to end up with wax on my iron. And then I'm going to just press it with my hot iron, so it will transfer the wax onto the paper. I'm just giving it a little bit longer because this is quite thick paper, but I can see the wax coming through a little bit, so I'll part them now. And of course there's nothing to see at the moment, and so what we've got now is the wax has transferred to the paper. So I'm going to use my distressing dusty concord and then run this over the top, and already you can start to see the pattern that was left from the wax, because it's now acting as a resist. So that's the effect that it creates. And obviously then we could ink this one up as well. And this one didn't work quite so well on parts of it. So maybe the heat didn't get right the way through. Maybe the guest checks were just a bit too thick, and maybe I would have been better turning it over and heating it up from the other side as well. So lesson learnt there. So you can see the difference between the two, look. So one's worked really well and the other one has worked a little bit but not as well. Okay. And then you're left with this piece of wax paper, and I'm going to show you something that we can do with these later on. So now I'm cutting a piece of the cut right wax paper. To the same size as these index cards. And we're going to do the same thing again, just scrunch it all up and break up the wax. And you can scrunch it a few times to get us a finer crack in the wax. And then we're going to open it up. Sit it on top of the index card and sit the other one on top. Make sure that there's no wax paper just peeking through, being cheeky, and then press with the iron. Now again, this is quite thick, these index cards, so I'm just going to leave it a little bit longer on the front side, and then I'm going to flip it over and do it on the other side as well.
So we want to make sure that we melt that wax. So I'm just going to flip it over. Do it on this side.
You can actually see a little bit of the imprint. I don't know whether the camera will pick that up, of the wax. And this time I'm going to do it with Faded Jeans Distress Oxide. And I think that the darker colours work better because it shows the pattern up really well. And of course you could do blending, so you could do more than one colour on it. But that's up for you to then go off and go and play and see what you can come up with. Okay. So let me bring back that guest check, because what you need to do as well is you then need to rub off the excess ink with a kitchen towel. So you're basically buffing it up. So it's taken a little bit of the distress ink off. And with the oxide, I have a feeling, yeah, take quite a bit of this off. It almost looks to me like coral or seaweed under the sea. So that took quite a bit of the ink off. But you can see the effect that it starts to create. And it's just a very, very different kind of background to it. I'm going to show you another technique now, so I'll just tidy this lot away. So with this technique, we're actually going to use embossing folders. Right, so I've cut a piece of wax paper the same size as my embossing folder, and I'm going to place it in there, and I'm just going to go and run that through my machine. So it's now left an impression on the wax paper. Okay, so we need to remember that one side's debossed and the other side is embossed. Embossed raised, debossed sunk into. Okay, and then I've got some paper here, some good quality paper, and I'm going to cut it into 4-ish. So I want 2 pieces, because remember this is double-sided, and then I'm just going to trim this down so that it sits inside the 2 pieces of paper. Okay, sit the other piece of paper on top. And press it with the iron. And I can see the wax coming through the paper. So you'll need to try it with different substrates to see which one works best that you've got in your stash, because some will work better than others depending on the type of paper and the coating that it's got on it. So you might have to have a little bit of an experiment to see which one's going to work better. Okay, let's see what that does. Okay, I can see the pattern on there, and I'm going to use the lighter colour Victorian Velvet, so I don't want it too heavy. And let's see what happens. Oh, it's not working quite so well with the oxide. Let's just wipe some of that excess off. Yeah, you can see a little bit of the pattern, but you can't see an awful lot of it. I think because it's so pigmented, I think that it's kind of just soaking over the top. Let's have a go with the Distress ink and see if that's any better. Oh, that's definitely better, look. So Distress ink definitely works better than the oxide. And again, we'll just give that a little bit of a wipe. You can see the difference between the two, look. So it's kind of picked up the wax here, acting as the resist, but it shows up far better on this side using the Distress ink. So these were some of the other pieces that I created previously, and that was with the scrunched up technique. And these were with embossing folders. So you can see it's picked up the pattern which was going around the outside. Hope you can see that, because the sun's really bright at the moment. And again, you've got the pattern around the outside on this one. So it obviously worked better on this card. Oh, there you go, look, embossing folder, Distress ink, Wild Honey. Notice the crinkling in the centre. Okay, I noticed it, thank you. And this one says, embossing folder, Distress ink, tea dye. There you go. So that's those bits. So those are ones that I've done previously. And you end up being left with all these pieces of waxed paper. And they kind of are a bit like glassine now. Little bit like glassine. So you could actually make them into little bags or pockets. So if we fold that over, and actually let me do it with this, because then you can see the colour better, can't you? So I'm folding it over into the centre and then folding that over to overlap. And then folding up the bottom. Open it back out. Trim those two side rectangles off, because there should hardly be any wax on here now. There will be some, because you probably won't have been able to transfer it all. But the majority of the wax will have been transferred onto the paper. And then I'm just going to fold that over and put some glue on the edge there. Put some glue on the edge of that piece. So it's not like you're using the wax paper and then throwing it away, because you can make little bags and envelopes with it depending on obviously the size of the wax paper that you'd already pre-cut and used. But we're only able to do this because we've taken the wax off it. And then I use my fancy scissors. Need to be careful because the glue won't have set yet. But I've made myself a nice little bag that's like glassine. And in fact, that's what I did with this piece here. So this was the leftover wax paper, and I made it into a little bag to put the tag into. But I think that if you get the right paper, be prepared to have a little bit of a play, it can create some amazing effects. And in fact, I think that one was with an embossing folder. So it just shows that it does work. You just need to find the right paper to do it on with the embossing folder. But in terms of scrunching it up and then just iron it onto a substrate, it kind of works really well. And I think that going by these samples here, I think that the oxide works okay. But I think that the distress ink might give a better effect. What do you think? Which do you prefer? Anyway, that's my little technique for today. And I'll be back next week with another technique. And you can have a little play with that. I'll put some pictures up at the end together with my destructions, which I'll be sticking into my book later on. And then there'll be some more videos during the week, maybe even a live later on this week, working on my Royal Journal. And there will be the new digital kits will be going up on my Etsy store, but I'll tell you all about that when I do the next live, which will either be Thursday or Friday of this week. Okay, I'm off now for my tea. Thanks ever so much for joining me. I hope that you've been inspired by this a little. Leave me a comment, give me a thumbs up. If you're new to my channel, I hope that you will subscribe, and then you'll get the notifications then if you hit that bell of when I'm doing new videos. Thanks for joining me. See you again soon. Bye for now. Bye.